So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Last week we said that experience doesn't necessarily make you wiser. That's why some people stay stupid. Right? That's how that works, right? Some people make a bad decision, then they get up from that bad decision, they dust themselves down, and then they go off and they do exactly the same thing all over again. And that's why we said that before you get into round two, whatever it is, whether it's a relationship or a business or a career, before you move into round one, you have to stop and acknowledge what went wrong for you in round one. In other words, for you to ensure that your negative history doesn't repeat itself, you have to own your role in your own negative history in order to make sure that your past doesn't keep creeping into your future. You have to pause long enough for you to own your responsibility for your part of the train wreck. You have to own the bit of it that was your fault. And of course, the reason we almost never do this is because there's never anything to own, is there? I'm talking about me now, not you. Right? When we look at the things that went wrong, the things that didn't work, it wasn't my fault. There's this game we play, and we play it really well. We have a better story to tell than the truth. And the story always ends up where we're totally innocent and they're 100% to blame. This is our nature to avoid responsibility. And so I thought this morning we'd talk a little bit about responsibility. You should have taken your partner here. When we talk about you being responsible for your own life, we're talking about two things principally. First of all, we're talking about the fact that you are in control of your own life. You, if I may quote William Ernest Henley, are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. This idea burns deeply in the psyche of our species, from the crowded beaches of Lesbos to the tantrums of a teenage bedroom. We will suffer no one to impinge upon our freedom. To be the one who is in charge of your own life is one of the most fundamental assertions of our humanity. So get it into your head. Revel in it, rejoice in it, be sobered by it. For better or for worse, you are in control of your own life. And that being the case, when we talk about you being responsible, we're secondly talking about the fact that you are accountable. It follows, does it not, that if you are in control of your own life, you are therefore accountable for the things that you do and the decisions that you make. Which immediately gives us the rub of this subject. You see, as soon as you accept the premise that your life is your responsibility, then you have to further accept that many of the disappointing and frustrating areas of your life are your fault. That's just logical. And it's a big, uncomfortable, unpalatable pill for us to swallow, because we constantly look for ways to divorce freedom from responsibility. In fact, we live in a culture that encourages us to divorce freedom from responsibility. Occasionally we see spectacular examples of this. For example, in 2003, a dangerously overweight man called Caesar Barber felt bad about the fact he was morbidly obese, as many of us do at this time of the year. He felt bad about the fact that because of his obesity, he was suffering from bad joints, bad blood pressure. He'd had 2 heart attacks. He was short of breath. So he understandably felt badly about where his life had ended up. And so he did what any rational person would do in those circumstances. He sued McDonald's. His argument was that his obesity wasn't his fault, it was their fault. and that they should therefore be held accountable for ruining his life. It wasn't me who did this. When it comes to my health, here's the subtext. I am not the master of my fate. I am not the captain of my own soul. I am not in control of my own life. Therefore, I am not to blame. Someone else did this to me. Someone else screwed me over. I don't suppose that any of us would be quite so crass in our abdication of responsibilities, but we are rather adept at shifting the blame in our relationships, in our finances, in our careers. We quite regularly throw up our hands in innocence and persuade ourselves and others that it wasn't our fault. And I think that every day we try to shift the blame away from ourselves onto others is actually a day we resign ourselves to being no better than we currently are. Every time we fail to learn from round one, from our past, we doom ourselves to repeating its failures in round two in the future. So this morning, to help us work our way out of this, we're going to read from a part of the biblical story that relates to this business of blame shifting. Let's have our first sentence up on the screen, please, Dave, and we'll get going. So this is ancient, right? This is the start of the Bible, page 1, book of Genesis. And what I like about this is that the writer gives you the impression that he really gets it. He really gets what it's like to be a human person. So in verse 26 of his opening chapter, he says to his audience, "Then God said, 'Let us make.'" Now, those of you who've gone to confirmation classes will perhaps know that the flow of this story up until this point is that God has created the natural world, and then at the climax of that creation, he pauses and turns around and says a few words to the inhabitants of heaven. The angels, the unicorns, I don't know, whoever happened to be there. Have a look at this picture. This is a painting of the young Queen Victoria, and what she's doing in this painting is she's meeting with her Privy Council and her Prime Minister. And all throughout history, monarchs had a habit of doing this. They would get together and they would meet with their ministers and their advisors, and they would then carry out their instructions. In the ancient world, this habit was known as the heavenly court. So what's going on in Genesis chapter 1 is that these heavenly creatures, the angels and the unicorns and whoever, have been watching. They haven't been saying anything. They haven't been involved. They've just been watching. They've been watching God make the continents, the mountains, the rivers, the blowfish, all that stuff, but they've been keeping their mouth quiet. And then at the climax of the creation story, once God has made almost everything, he stops. He turns around to this audience and he says, "If you think that was good, wait till you see this. If that blew your mind, what I'm about to do is going to drive you nuts. This is insane. Drum roll, please. Let us make man in our own image, in our likeness." So in this sentence, God is saying to the inhabitants of heaven that this species of humanity is going to be made in our image, in our likeness. Let me define the terms, then we'll move on. Let's have a look at this. What is this? Yes, this is the Batmobile. Those of you who have young children will recognize this. Now, this is the actual Batmobile that was actually used in one of the actual Batman movies. Pretty cool. Next photo. This car is a replica of the actual Batmobile that was actually used in one of the actual Batman movies. This car was never in a movie. This car has never been anywhere near a movie set. This is a copy. This is an image. This is a facsimile. It looks the same. It behaves the same, but it's not the same. In biblical terminology, we call this an image. We call this a likeness. So the radical, and may I say humanistic, worldview of the opening page of the Bible is that man exists in the copy, in the image, in the facsimile, in the likeness of God. And the reason I say that that is a radical humanistic worldview is because in the cultures of the ancient Near East from which Genesis emerged, only one man was ever spoken of as being in the image or the likeness of God. And that one man was, of course, always the king. For example, in one text from ancient Mesopotamia, we read that, and this is royal propaganda, those words you're looking at on the screen were written so that ordinary plebs, ordinary worker drones like you and me would shut up and obey the king and do what you were told. The text says, "The father of my lord the king is the very image of Bel, the Babylonian god, and the king my lord is the very image of Bel." So do you get the propaganda of that text? We who wrote these words are the royal family. We hold your ordinary lives in the palm of our powerful hands. And we need you plebs to know that we're not ordinary men and women. No, no, no. That's what you are. That's not what we are. We are God men. We are God women. We are created in his image. Let's look at another propaganda text, also from Mesopotamia. This one says of the king that he is the lord of the lands, the very image of Shamash. Shamash was the sun god. The subtext, well, not the subtext, the text being very obvious. The king is God. And because he's God, you have to carry on working and obeying and not questioning his divine right to do whatever he wants to your ordinary life. Let's have a look at this guy. So this is the face mask of Tutankhamun. As you know, what you may not know is that the name Tutankhamun means the living image of the god Amun. Same message, same propaganda, same subtext. I'm not like you. You're ordinary. You're a pleb. You work. You do what you're told. I do the telling. And the reason I do the telling is because I am the image of God on earth. Understand? This is ingrained, deeply ingrained in the ancient worldview. Men and women were not made in the image of God. Men and women were made to serve the image of God. And this notion of servitude is explicit in the famous Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish. Very similar to Genesis, probably more important than Genesis in many ways. In that Babylonian creation story, the creation of the world is a happy consequence of a big fight in heaven that took place between the gods. I'll spare you the details, except to say that the god who won this battle was called Marduk, and Marduk wasn't magnanimous in victory. To punish all the other gods who he beat in battle, he gave them the contemptuous duty of looking after the newly created earth. And these lesser gods objected to this. They weren't used to working for a living. They didn't like having calluses on their hands. They didn't like getting dirt under their fingernails. And so, like desperate housewives on a construction site, they were quite useless, quite whiny, and a pain in the neck. And so they pleaded with the victorious Marduk to lessen their load. Marduk eventually took pity on them. And then the Enuma Elish says this: to help the gods who he defeated in battle, he formed mankind, imposed toil on men, and set the gods free. This is the worldview out of which Genesis came. A worldview that says very, very powerfully that men are not free. Men are not in control of their own fate. They are not the masters of their own lives, nor the captains of their own souls. They are at best an afterthought, a beast of burden who is born to serve the gods and the kings whose image they bear. And so you'll notice then that the anthropology of Genesis could not be more different. When the writer of Genesis says that men and women are made in the image of God, he's saying actually that men and women are free. They do not exist to serve the gods. They do not exist to serve the kings. They all, black and white, rich and poor, blue-blooded and trailer park trash, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, whatever, they all bear the same image of God. And here is how this radical idea bears upon our discussion this morning. On page 1 of the Bible, the writer rails against the servile culture in which he lives. He raises an angry, defiant fist to the gods of his neighbours, and he plants rebellion in the minds of his fellow slaves. And he says, this isn't how it is. Men are born to be free. Men are born to be in charge of their own lives and their own futures. They were made to be the masters of their own fate. They were made to be responsible for their own life. Men have got responsibility woven into the fabric of their God-given identity. To be human is to be responsible, is his worldview. Next sentence. So God created man as in his image. In the image of God he created him. And then to head any accusations of sexism off at the past, he makes it very clear what he means. The image of God means male and female, masculinity and the other one. I just had a stammer moment. Did you just laugh at my disability? This would just happen. It's bad. Anyway, so follow the flow of the story. Move on from what you just did. Having been made in the image of God, men are then given responsibilities. So God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Now when I read that sentence, there's a part of me that wants to put up my hand and say, okay, but what about the rules? What's the rules? Where's the boundaries? I need to know what about the 10 Commandments? What about the 613 rules of the Torah? Can we talk about those? Can we talk about the thou shalt nots? We should probably have a few thou shalt nots, God, if you know me. We should probably throw in a few of those. But there's none of that, because here's the idea. On page 1, we're talking about paradise. And the more responsible you are, the less rules you need. Isn't that true? And the reverse is true with your kids. The more rules you give your kids, the more you're making a value judgment on what you think of their ability to be responsible. Rules are not great, I don't think. So anyway, we get just 2 responsibilities, no real rules yet. Those responsibilities are kind of like work on a farm and have sex. That's kind of like, it sounds like a twisted Amish reality show. But there you are. Now if I'm right, and of course I am right, to derive from my reading of Genesis that you are created to be responsible, then that must mean therefore that you are at your happiest in life when you are being responsible. I would suggest to you, I dare you to disagree with me, that you are at your most satisfied when you're doing a good job of the things you're responsible for. I'll bet that you feel really good about yourself when you're performing really well at work. When your house is clean, when your children are well taken care of, when your bills are getting paid on time, when your customers are happy. I'll just bet that it feels best to be you when you're taking care of all the things that you are responsible to take care of. And I'll further bet that the reverse is also true. I'll bet that when you're not being a good mother, when you're lazy at work, when you're providing bad service for your customers, when your home life is falling apart, when you're not taking care of all your responsibilities, I'll bet that that's when it feels worst to be in your skin. That's when deep down you feel least happy with yourself. And I think the reason for that is because you and I were made for responsibility. That's my theory. Anyway, back to the story. Men and women are given lots of responsibilities, but they're given very few rules. In fact, they're only given one rule. It's a strange rule. I didn't make it up. It's just in the story. And the strange rule is, you can do anything you want. You can have, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Just don't eat from the fruit of that one tree. Now, I think God was setting himself up for failure right there. Right? It's like there's a room. You can do anything you want. Just whatever you do, don't push that button. It's the first place you're going to go. I don't know. I'm not giving God advice. I'm just telling it like it is. So anyway, true to form, they do the one thing they're not allowed to do. They go and they eat from the fruit. They push the button, whatever. Let's fast forward to the part where they deal with the guilt and the shame of all of that. So Genesis chapter 3 and verse 8. This is after everything's gone wrong. This is after they've messed up, after the gears have crunched. This is the morning after the night before. So we're told there, then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid, curious word, from the Lord among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said, "Where are you? Where are you?" It's just a question. There's no accusation in the question. It's just a question. Like, why did you let your health get so bad? Why do you have a bad relationship with your son? Why is your house never clean? Why are your children watching 5 hours of television a day? It's not a judgment question, it's just a question. Just trying to establish the facts so that we can have a conversation based on the facts. Where are you? It's a good question. How are you doing? Really? It's that kind of question. In response to the question, the man said, "I heard you in the garden and I was scared because I was naked, so I hid." So you know how when you're at home, and you're sitting in front of the TV in your pajamas and you're covered in Cheeto dust, and the doorbell rings, right? There's just like a mad, frantic rush for normal clothes because there's some things about you that you don't want other people to see or know about. Well, that's even more true, I think, when it comes to the whole business of responsibility. When you don't take care of the things that you're supposed to take care of, there's a little bit of shame in your life there. Conversely, when you do things that you're not meant to do, there's a little bit of shame in your life. And your natural response to shame is to hide, to conceal. That's just how it is. So then in the next sentence, God says, "Who told you that you were naked?" Now, every time I read that sentence, I find it quite funny. Because I've been naked before, and I think in 100% of cases, I've been aware of it. For example, I can think of 0 occasions when I've been walking around Zayres and halfway around suddenly realised that I forgot to get dressed that day. That never happens, happily. So when God says to the naked Adam, "Hey, who told you you were naked?" He's not saying, "Who was it that pointed out to you that you forgot to get dressed today?" He's saying something more pointed than that. He's saying, "What's with the guilt? What's with the shame? I can see it in your eyes. I can see in the way you're avoiding me. I can tell by looking at you that something's up, that you're embarrassed about something. What is it? What did you do? Where did this come from? What went wrong?" And then God says, you did it, didn't you? You pushed the button. Is that what you did? Have you eaten from the tree? The one tree of all the millions of trees. Have you eaten from that tree that I commanded you not to eat from? And I don't think that's a very nice thing for God to have said. It's not very understanding. It's a bit blunt. And I say that because God seems to be suggesting that there's a direct relationship between morality and malady. He seems to be suggesting that there is such a thing actually as cause and effect, that there is a relationship between a person's actions and consequences. So here is the subtext for this sentence. Having established that the man is feeling ashamed and guilty about something, having recognized that this person's life has gone downhill, that it's taken a turn for the worst, God then immediately goes to a place where he says, what did you do? It wasn't me. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't McDonald's. You must have done something that made this go wrong for you in your life. So what was it? What did you do? Fair question. I think it's a fair question. Next sentence. The man said, yes, I did eat from the tree. I accept full responsibility for what I did. Shouldn't have done it. Leave the woman out of it. It wasn't her fault. That would have been nice. What he actually said was this, however. The woman. Yeah. We can go home. The woman you put here with me, she gave me some of the fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Notice the I ate bits at the end of the sentence. Bury the bad news at the end. And we do this through brilliant rationalization. The criminal becomes the victim. This is the game we play in our culture and in our lives all the time. It wasn't you. It wasn't your fault. It was the circumstances. It was your upbringing. It was this. It was that. It's not because you eat too much. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you don't work hard enough. It's not because you don't play the game at work the way that the game's not meant to be played at work. It's none of those things. It's not you. It's okay. Look at what the man does here. He says, there's a reason why my life sucks. This is the subtext. There's a reason why my life sucks. In fact, there's two reasons why my life sucks. I'm in touch with myself. I know exactly why my life sucks. Reason number one, the person I'm married to. Reason number two, God. Notice how he blames God as well. The woman you gave me. I have a bad wife. God gave me a bad set of cards. That's why it all went wrong. My defense is, if I was married to a better person, and if God had given me a fairer shake of the stick, then I wouldn't be in this mess today. Somebody get me a therapist, because I deserve it. That's his defense. And that's why I said earlier that this is actually a brilliant expose of humanity. He gets humanity, doesn't he? This is probably an early Bronze Age, late Bronze Age text. He gets it. He gets it. Let's wrap this up by looking at some pie. That's better. Too hard. You're welcome. Okay, so let's say that this pie, this might be literally true. Let's say that this pie represents 100% of your problems. Let's say that this pie represents 100% of everything that went wrong in round one. All of your mess, all of your failure, all of the things that went wrong, all of the frustrations. That's 100% of this pie. Now, of course it's true to say that not everything was your fault. Of course that's true. Of course it's true to say that you're not 100% to blame. But that doesn't mean that none of it was your fault. So let's take a slice of the pie. What slice of the pie are you responsible for? What slice of the mess, of the disappointment, of the train wreck was your fault. I know it's going to be a small slice, believe me. Real small. So thin you could shave with it. I know. Me too. But let's talk about that slice. No point talking about the rest of it. Let's talk about that slice. That is your fault. That is your responsibility. So what are you going to do differently in round 2? What are you going to do next time so it won't be like last time? You are in control of your life. You are the master of your own fate, the captain of your own soul. What are you going to do so it won't be the same? Look in the mirror and ask yourself the question, have I taken responsibility for what I did wrong? Or am I doing the blame thing so much that it's allowed me to ignore the things I am responsible for? God created you to handle responsibility. You're at your happiest when you handle it well, even when it's uncomfortable. But if you don't pause and own your slice of the pie, you will drag it with you into your future. You can't blame your way into a better tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. Blame actually sets you up for a repeat performance, for the one thing you want to avoid the most. That's just how it is. That was horrible, wasn't it? I'm sorry. And maybe one question. Any questions? Well, it wasn't that. Yeah, it wasn't that.
So the Bible wasn't manipulated or used to create that concept?
No, I don't think so. And I think even I think when people spoke about the divine right of kings, in fact, I know they didn't talk about the kings being made in the image of God. I don't, as far as I know. So no. Oh yeah, for sure. The Bible was used to manipulate people. It still is. Still is. That's why you have to read it with your, with your brain firmly engaged. Right now, in churches all across the world, people will be opening the Bible and using it to manipulate people. To manipulate people into a certain course of action, to manipulate them out of their money. The Bible is a great way of getting people to do what you want them to do. That's why we should come to church with our brains engaged, I think. And I hope you do. And if you don't, that's great news for me. but I hope you do. Good question. Any others? Okay, we're done. See you next Sunday.